We're four friends with hot takes on food media.
And we're here to review and recap all kinds of food shows in bite-sized seasons.
Plus, virtual potlucks, cooking adventures, and food memes.
Welcome to Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes.
Hi, I'm Amanda.
Hey, it's Justine.
And it's me, Meg.
Welcome back to Season 3 of Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes. This season, we've been talking about the Great British Bake Off, UK Series 11, aka US Season 8. On the menu for today, we have Episode 9, Patisserie Week, and Episode 10, The Final!
The final!
But first, even before we get into what we've been up to culinary-wise, we want to make an announcement. Since this is our third to... Anyway, we're wrapping up Season 3. And you may have noticed we haven't announced what we're doing for Season 4 yet. That's because we want some audience participation. And we're going to be doing a mini March Madness bracket. So we want to know what you guys want us to cover. So please send us suggestions on social media, particularly Twitter, at pod_appétit. So yeah, send us what food shows and culinary universe things that you want to get our gourmet takes on. Back to the regular programming, let's kick things off with what we have been up to culinary-wise, or what we've been cooking, eating, getting up to in the kitchen.
Well, I know I've shared this with you, Amanda, because we've been talking about our food changes, dietary changes we've been having lately.
Yeah.
And you were so excited about what I was eating for breakfast every day that I wanted to share it with everybody. I've had a new breakfast routine for the month, and it's been going awesome. It's a hot, nutty cereal. Basically, it's oatmeal done to the 10th degree.
Hot and nutty.
I take a half a cup of oats and make that, but you could use a half a cup of any grain that you can eat in the morning. Quinoa, amaranth, kashi, whatever. Basically, it's what you add to it that makes it like awesome for you. I am using 2 tablespoons of fruit, fresh, frozen, or dried, raisins or blueberries, what have you. And I add 4 tablespoons of nuts, and this can be pistachios, it can be almonds, it could be coconut shreds, it could be nut butter. And then I add 2 tablespoons of seeds, and this is also great for getting like omega-3s, like if you do chia seeds, hemp seeds.
Flax seeds.
Yes. Pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds. That's basically it. And then you could, I add like a splash of maple syrup just for like the sweetness. But you could add like a little dash of vanilla, or you can add some like cocoa powder to make it chocolatey. But basically, I have been starting my mornings like this all month with this extra boost of protein and energy, and I think it's been going well.
Choose your own adventure oatmeal.
I know. That's like the fun part. Like every day I'm like eating something different. It's just these parameters.
Nice.
Justine texted a picture of it to me yesterday, and I was like, I want to eat that.
You can. It's so easy.
I know. I like this a lot. I know we were talking beforehand about trying to cut back on screen time in the morning before you get the day going and stuff. And I feel like this would be a good way for me to focus in on making sure I have a good breakfast, because my day starts so early. As Meg has said, Twitter can wait. It doesn't need checked first thing. I guess I'll go next, because of course it's me, so I haven't done a lot. But the big food news, as Justine kind of hinted to, is I met with my doctor, and so I'm going through some dietary changes, cutting back on fried things and red meat, and I've definitely been trying to kind of clear out my pantries. Like I had some cookies saved to the side, and I'm like, okay, got to get rid of it all so I don't have everything. But I told Justine on Friday I was very excited. There's a candy drawer at work, and I didn't touch it all week. So it's like my culinary victory for this week, is I never touched the candy drawer at work. I think I only had red meat once this week. Everything else I either had a salad or chicken or turkey or something like that.
Very cool. Nicely done.
Yeah. What about you, Meg? What have you been up to?
I guess I've been possessed by the spirit of the Bake Off because I've been on a little bit of a baking tear, kind of unintentionally, but I made 2 kinds of biscuits. I made buttermilk biscuits, and I also made Molly Baz's sour cream and green onion biscuits, which are really good. I once again made the shockingly easy, no-knead focaccia. Yeah, that's what it's called. And I made a vanilla buttermilk cake with strawberry whipped cream, which was super good. I made the mistake ? Of getting this cookbook called Snacking Cakes by Yassi Arefi. So it's just these really easy to make cakes that don't need a lot of ingredients or a lot of preparation, and it's a little dangerous for me to have around the house maybe because I could just whip up a cake.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my
I'm
God.
like, Amanda just cut sugar from her diet. Now you're
I
like,
know. I'm cutting back on
cake?
sugar and like trying to focus on fruit and vegetables. And yeah, I'm really glad I don't have that cookbook, Snacking Cakes. Oh my God, that would be so dangerous.
Yeah.
So, moving into the Great British Bake Off. First up, we have episode 9, Patisserie Week. Syrup draped Savarin, almondy Danish cornucopias, and dainty cube cakes test the chefs, who will land that exquisite finish or fall short of the finals. So, yeah, Patisserie Week for the signature, the Savarin, or as Laura kept saying, the Savarins.
Savarin. I am just really curious, as someone who has experienced these last 2 episodes before and then had to rewatch them. I'm like, how did Amanda feel about these?
Yes, this episode in particular was very controversial, had a lot of internet uproar. I don't know if we want to get into that right this second, maybe once we talk about the ending. But yeah, I'm also very curious to know how you felt, Amanda, about these episodes.
My first note was based off of Prue saying, oh, these are among the best bakers we've ever had. And I said, are these the best?
Are they?
These were the best you've ever had? Because I'm sorry, this season before was, I feel like, yes, absolutely. Like with Raoul and Ruby and but this, I was just like, I'm sorry, what? I don't think so. Like, and then my next note was, I guess I'm rooting for Hermine at this point.
Wah, wah, wah. I also had a note about Prue's comment because I was like, I don't think so. Would be the part that if I were communicating in a GIF, I would show that GIF of Thor from Thor Ragnarok where he's like, are they though?
Really?
Are they? Yeah. I mean, as much as I did, I liked the challenges that they had in this episode. I thought they were interesting. But oh my God, like even from Go, I was like, Hermine, don't restart. It needs proved. It's never gonna get proved enough if you completely restart the challenge now.
Yeah, speaking of Hermine, the narrative going into this episode is definitely, this is Hermine's week. It's her challenge to lose. She's so strong with patisserie. And I can't help but wonder if maybe these really high expectations caused the judges to judge her more harshly because they were like, this is what's in your wheelhouse. I don't know. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Just if it were me and I were on a competition show and I felt I were good at something, that I excelled at something, I don't think I would tell anyone because then they would have these really high expectations for me.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like just because she was French, they were going to be like, oh, patisserie, it's you. But it's still, yeah.
Yeah. So like you were saying, going into the signature with the Savarins, Hermine started over her dough because it was underproved. And even after the second try, it still remained underproved, which I guess isn't too surprising because how much time did she really have left by that point? And the end result looked very nice and tasted pretty good, they said, but yes, underproved.
What is a rum baba?
I know, they kept saying rum baba like I was supposed to know what that means.
Okay. This is where we need an LJ report from the future.
Something with rum in it. That's about all I figured out.
I mean, they just seem like alcohol-soaked cakes.
Yeah.
Except Peter, and I full-on rolled my eyes at this, where he's like, I don't really drink that much. And I'm like, that's because you're a child!
Is he even of legal drinking age in the UK? I think he was 20. I don't know how old you have to be in the UK to drink.
Well, when I was there, I believe it was 15 or 16. Because when I was 18, I got drunk there a lot. Just say that.
I mean, that's why I went to Mexico when I was 19. I understand.
Yeah. Then I came back to college and was like, what's this? I can't drink. Going to anyway.
I do like what Peter came up with.
True. I don't know. It just felt like, of course, he's like, oh, I don't drink. I'm going to make the only alcohol-soaked cake that doesn't have alcohol in it.
He called himself a teetotaler, and he said that he goes to a club sober and leaves after an hour.
Same.
Which is exactly how I would have guessed Peter would be if he hadn't told us. But yeah, these turned out great. They looked beautiful, really neat and uniform. And Peter at the top of the episode emphasized that Patisserie Week is different. It's not like home bakes. They have to be really precise and perfect and elegant. So you really seem to tick all those boxes with this bake. And Paul gave him the handshake.
Oh, did Dave did something Mexican again?
He did.
Honey
He did
tequila.
Tequila.
Dave's got 2 modes.
Coffee and Mexican.
Yeah.
That's all right. Peter has a mode, and we'll get into that in the next episode.
Christmas?
Yep.
Laura's, though, hers came out good. A little irregular in size, but pretty lovely sponge, but she overdid her spices. Oh, God, I can't believe there's only 4 people.
I know.
They once again said tastes nice, looks a mess, because they did kind of squish out all over the place. But once again, it seems like her flavors were her saving grace. And Paul said something really sweet. He said, oh, I would send these back so that I could meet the chef and thank her. And I thought that was really cute of him to say.
Paul really favors Laura.
He really does. I think she plays to him, too.
Yeah.
I did feel a little bad for Dave because I liked the dishes he had where it had the curd underneath the cake, the savarant, and
they look good.
They were like, oh, I know it's aesthetic. And I thought, well, part of the point is that you're supposed to do it all in like one spoonful or forkful. And I felt like they didn't even really fully use the curd, but I thought it looked nice.
I thought it was a nice aesthetic, too. I think that instead of them poo-pooing it because it was different, I think they should have been like, oh, you did something different. That's interesting.
Yeah. These guys.
Dave in this episode and the next episode were very entertaining to me because he always seemed quite pleased with himself, like very excited. And I was like, okay, like slow your roll a little bit. You've done well, but I don't know if you should be patting yourself on the back quite so much.
So next up was the technical, and they had Danish cornucopias or horns of plenty.
Do you want to try some of my horn?
Yes.
Paul asked Prue.
Wow, Paul, come on.
Oh, the double entendres. I loved it. Yeah, there was a lot of stuff, like Dave's slightly curved penis-shaped horn.
Phallic
Paul
shape,
could not
come
keep
on.
it together. Yeah.
This was a struggle for everyone.
Yeah, the math of the shaping was hard on the bakers, especially Laura.
Yes.
Well, this is one of those technical challenges where it's like, I'm sure it tastes fine, but who really is ever going to feel compelled to make this or be like, oh, I could really go for a Danish cornucopia right now? It's the semifinals. They're definitely breaking out the fiddly, complex, difficult to make things for the technical challenge just to fluster the contestants, it seems.
Yeah. Part of me is like, why are you referencing like cigar shape?
It just didn't seem actually cigar shaped. I felt like they could have said ovals or, I don't know, something else that could have been clearer. Even though, I mean, it's not like Paul was trying to be clear in his instructions, but...
It did seem intentionally confusing. At least they gave them the guides for both the pieces and the chocolate scrolls. I can't even imagine what these would have turned out like if they didn't have the guides for the dough.
I mean, I know Laura was having a hard time, and I get that, but I thought Matt was very sweet with her. Like,
Yeah.
as silly as Matt can be, like, when he could tell she was really kind of panicking, like, the way that he just kind of, like, talked to her and calmed her down and kept her going, I thought showed why he is a host on this, and I think he's a good host on this show.
I think he did a good job, too. I think that he and Laura in particular had a little bit of a bond. It seemed like they really liked joking with each other and talking about West End shows and things like that. So I feel like those two in particular had, a little bit of a friendship going.
So Dave can't make caramel again.
He's really determined, so.
And as we'll see in the final, he's just like, I'm going to do better at everything I've done badly at before.
Go away, Dave. Go away.
I feel like an American would have had an advantage for this challenge because we all know what a cornucopia looks like.
Yep.
We see it every American Thanksgiving.
Well, yeah, that was the other thing is I thought cornucopia is a pretty common shape, isn't it? Just like crescent from another episode
Crescent?
ago.
What is that?
Crescent
LJ
shape?
did confirm that. She's like, I know what crescent means. Like,
Yeah. That's why I'm like, I want to know from LJ, a future report. Cornucopia, is this something that no one in Britain knows about?
I feel like I only know of it because of Thanksgiving, so.
Yeah, for sure. So Peter got first in the technical. Hermine got second, Dave got third, and Laura came in last.
Yeah, hers completely fell apart.
Her caramel did not work either.
No, I thought Hermine's she was the only one that also understood how it was supposed to be shaped and put on top of a stand.
Yes. Hers looked the most cornucopia-like, for sure. But they said the decoration was a little bit lacking, which it seems like that's what pushed Peter's into first.
Yeah, and her flavor was like just okay.
So then we go into the Showstopper, a 25 cube cake. So little mini cube cakes to all create sort of a larger cake.
Like a Rubik's Cube. Not 80s week.
I thought this was definitely it felt like it fit into similar challenges that they've had for Showstoppers in the past for Patisserie. A lot of, uniformity and everything kind of small and wee. And this was a hard one to watch because, it became clear very early on that Peter and Dave were doing just fine and they weren't going to have any trouble. And then Hermine and Laura.
So Hermine made the fatal mistake that we see sometimes on the Bake Off, which is that she decided to change her recipe at the last minute.
Yeah.
So she had been practicing a different recipe, but then she tells the judges that the day before she decided to scrap it and try something else, which unfortunately, as we see, did not necessarily turn out for her.
And Dave is just doing chocolate and caramel again.
Although I will say I really liked how Dave's looked. I was quite impressed by the end result.
He's done it like 5 times. You think like this time he got it. He can do it. He got it.
But it looked really nice. I mean, look at that versus look at what Laura presents,
Oh, God.
Laura looks like barbecue pork belly. I know which one I'd rather eat just based on looks alone.
I was kind of mad that they thought that it was just the heat that had gotten to Laura's, not that she just didn't make a mirror glaze correctly.
Yeah, because Peter made 3 different mirror glazes successfully.
Yeah. They were like, oh, it melted. Like, no, it didn't. That's how it always looked.
Yeah, when she was mixing it, it looked weird and grainy. It did not look like a mirror glaze.
Definitely not. Also, Laura was the only contestant who only had one type of cake. So she did the least, yet somehow struggled the most. Although, Hermine struggled as well.
Yeah.
So ultimately, Hermine was sent home and Laura got to stay, which really whipped up the internet into a frenzy. But we can talk about that in just a second.
Peter ended up getting Star Baker in this episode, and Hermine was out, and I wrote, I legit cried a little when she was sent home because I didn't think that Laura deserved to stay over her. I was very shocked, and it just seemed to be flavors. That seemed to be the only thing.
That's definitely the kernel of what the internet had a problem with for sure, is that it seemed like throughout the competition, Hermine was the stronger baker, Laura was struggling. A bunch of people were like, this is a totally wrong judgment. I will say also, this was the judgment I've most disagreed with in this season for sure, maybe ever on the Great British Baking Show. But what I didn't do was, go online and harass Laura, but apparently people are dicks and a lot of people did this.
Yeah.
So
Oh my God.
Yeah, so this was a really unfortunate outcome of this episode, is that people were mad that the contestant on the reality show they were watching didn't get into the finals, and they decided to take it out on poor Laura. And she actually tweeted a couple of things because she was getting so much cyberbullying. She said, "It's okay to be sad your favorite person didn't go through, but please remember, it's not my fault. I don't make the decisions. Great British Bake Off is all about kindness, and I haven't seen much of that on here." And in a second tweet, she went on to say, "It's easy to sit there on your sofa and judge, but I am a real person with feelings. Please take a moment to consider your words before you judge someone you've never met and whose food you've never tasted."
Yeah,
Oh,
Amanda,
that's
it was
sad.
bad.
I was sad about it, but I also, at no point did I go, rage, I've got to take to the internet and bully someone. I mean, yes, it happened a couple months ago, but at the same time, I'm like, it goes on. I don't, wow, people suck.
Yeah, I think it's especially difficult with cooking shows because as an audience member, literally all you have to go on is visuals, how it looks, and you just have to trust what the judges are relaying to you as a viewer. And this is actually one reason why I stopped watching Top Chef quite a while ago, is that I found that I just kept disagreeing with Tom Colicchio. Like every decision the judge Tom Colicchio made, I was like, how could you think that? How could you put this person first? And it seemed like Padma Lakshmi was kind of of the same opinion I was. Like, yeah, listen to Padma. But then Tom Colicchio always got his way. And I feel like this is a fault of judging or production, right? It really sucks that people decided to take it out on the contestants. But it's difficult, right? It's a lot to ask an audience to be like, no, you just got to trust us that it tasted good, when literally all we have to go on is what it looks like. And so much of food is visuals. They say that you eat with your eyes first. So it's a difficult thing because you feel unsatisfied as an audience member if you see this beautiful thing or a really ugly looking thing. And then apparently the flavors are the opposite.
Yeah, and I feel like, and we can get into this more next time, it's also hard to kind of calculate who's going to win in your head if they're not taking into account the previous two challenges.
Yeah, this is a concept that a lot of reality competition shows work off of, is that we're judging just based on this one episode alone, and that determines who wins and who loses. And in every single episode of Project Runway, Heidi Klum says, one day you're in, and the next day you're out. So they make a real point to emphasize it and dramatize it on Project Runway, which they don't really do so much on the baking show. They don't really highlight or hang a lantern on the fact that, oh no, we're just judging on this one day.
Yeah. Well, and just like, I feel like when I watched it, I was like, okay, well, Laura completely failed the technical, so that puts her lower in that, but it didn't matter.
And Paul even said, it's patisserie week, so it's got to look good. So when the show itself is telling the audience we're judging on looks, but then apparently that isn't what they actually judged on in the end, it's very annoying.
Yeah.
Clearly we weren't there to taste it, but I can see from the side of the judges, like they did say the one cake that Ermine made just was like a jello, or what did he, I forget exactly what he said, but it didn't seem to have a cake texture or anything. Like it just seemed like a little wobbly thing. So I can understand, but I guess, visually to us, it looked nicer than Laura's did. But if it tasted funky or wonky, then that's not, food is still food that you taste with your mouth.
Yeah, Ermine's rubbery, I think they said panna cotta like cube cake did not look very appetizing. No, it definitely didn't. But it also makes me wonder, how much do they judge concept, or is that even a criteria that they judge on? Because Ermine attempted 2 different kinds of cakes, whereas Laura only did one. And I just wonder if that factors into judging at all. But anyway, I was disappointed. Sounds like you guys were disappointed too.
Yeah. But I feel like I also come back to, and especially next episode, the finale, I'm like, what's Dave doing here?
Well, that too. How many of these people are we excited to watch? Answer, not very many.
Yeah. Well, let's take a quick break and then we'll come back with the final. And we're back. Episode 10, the final. Custard slices send the chefs scrambling. Walnut whirls have them in a twirl. Then dessert towers push them to new heights. Whose bakes take the cake? So, our finalists, Peter, I feel like going Peter, Paul, and Mary. Peter, Dave, and Laura.
In the intro sort of like recap of like who these people are, what their storylines are, it's like Laura's bakes have often been disastrous. Dave has always been improving, and Peter has always been great.
Yeah, I wrote in my notes, Dave, most improved. Laura, the underdog. Peter, the wonderkind. Yeah, so how do we feel going into this finale? We teased this a little bit before the commercial. I was not very excited about watching this finale. It just had a very anticlimactic feel to me. Even from the start, I was like, oh, I guess we're here. I really hope Peter wins because he's sweet and he seems like a nice kid. And of the three, in my opinion, he seems to be leagues above the other two as far as talent goes. So I went into this thinking, oh, I hope Peter wins. I'll be sad if he doesn't. But I also didn't feel a lot of excitement or tension or drama.
I feel like I was like, yes, Peter should win it. If Laura wins it, I'd be like, all right. But if Dave wins it, I'd be like, what?
I have to say, I have warmed up to Dave just a little bit, and only really in these last two episodes. I said before that he had this sort of overconfidence maybe, but it was actually kind of charming to me in a way, just because it was obvious that he was like having fun, which is fun to watch. And I feel like, especially in these last two episodes, he seemed to loosen up a bit. He was a bit stiff interacting with Noel and Matt in the beginning of the show, like didn't really know what to say, just kind of like laughed awkwardly. And I feel like he finally got a little bit of a rapport going. So I did warm up to Dave a little bit. I never warmed up enough that I was like rooting for him though.
I don't feel like I took as much umbrage to Dave. But I also, the whole time, I just kept thinking, really? Your hero was from Blink-182. Like, even at this point, I know that was like... I kept thinking going into the final, I mean, I watched them back to back, but as it's like you said, recapping who they are, I was like, man, I wish I could have seen, like, what this final could have been like with Ermine or Lottie in it. Because I feel like at least they would have come up with something creative and interesting. And that is something that I kind of feel like, even into the showstopper for this, which I know we'll talk about, but it didn't feel like anybody really pushed or, kind of did something truly showstopper amazing looking throughout, I think, this whole episode. To me,
I have to agree.
Like,
I felt disappointed by Peter's showstopper. I remember thinking, oh, this could be good, and then being like, I had watched this episode previously when it was airing, and I honestly totally forgot what their showstoppers were. So yeah, they were not very memorable, and it wasn't until upon second watch that I was like, oh yeah, that's what they made. So I agree with you, Amanda. It wasn't the most exciting of finales.
I liked Peter's. I thought Dave's would have been like great for like week 5, and then Laura's was just completely a disappointment.
I actually liked the look of Dave's the best, just because Laura's, like you said, it made no sense together. As the judges said, individually these elements are good, but thrown together just looked like this hodgepodge. I didn't know where my eyes should go. Peter's, I felt, was a little underwhelming, but I did actually like that Dave seemed to think about how all the elements would look presented together. I liked that he had the red strawberries with the Frasier cake, and then there was the red crackle decoration on the cream puffs. And it actually like echoed very nicely, and I think his proportions were the best in how they looked. But yeah, he was kind of hit or miss on the flavors, apparently. Sorry, we've kind of jumped right into the showstopper.
We've kind of jumped straight to the show. Yeah, I'm like, let's go back for a minute.
Let's rewind a little bit.
All right, so the signature challenge was custard slices. I mean, pretty quickly, it seemed like it was going to become, all right, this is going to be between Peter and Dave, and Laura, once again, is going to have some issues, but it's going to taste great. Good taste, bad presentation, which I relate too, personally, but I am not a contestant on a baking show of the best home bakers in the country of, any country.
Laura's looked so bad, though.
They looked like
It did.
they had been dropped, she said herself.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand why she was upset and why, like, she turned away and, like, Dave was trying to comfort her, which I thought was very nice of him to try to do. Also, custard slices, not really a thing here, but
No.
I'd eat it.
But Dave did caramel and coffee again.
He did.
One trick pony, maybe a two trick pony, maybe.
Yeah.
I did like that Dave, when he realized because he was going to do the little caramel spike things, that he was like, you know what? No. Like, he did have some self-editing during the signature that I thought showed how he had grown throughout the competition.
Yeah, he saw what was going wrong. And as Justine and I were talking in the last episode, it seemed like his instincts weren't always the best, but he did show good instinct here, being like, oh no, these hazelnut caramel decorations aren't working. I'm going to put a little coffee bean there instead. So maybe he is the most improved after all.
He's just been around the longest.
Yeah, this time it was Noel giving Laura the pep talk, which I thought was also a very sweet pep talk. Very nice words, I thought. I can't imagine how frustrating it would be to be Laura. Like, if it were me, I'd be like, man, I don't want my narrative on the show to be that, like, I cry and mess up all the time. So I just really felt for her when she was essentially hiding in the freezer. She was like, I don't want people to see me crying again. And I don't know, like, sometimes I feel like a pep talk would probably help, and sometimes I'd be like, can we not emphasize that I'm crying again?
Yeah.
So I just felt kind of bad for her.
Yeah, it very clearly seemed like when she went to the freezer that she was trying to hide from the cameras.
For sure.
Like,
Yeah.
that's rough. Especially because you can't always control when you start crying. As a heavy crier, sometimes someone says something, or I don't know, and it's just like it hits you and you don't mean for it to, and you can't control it.
Yeah, especially in the high stress situation of being on a nationally televised baking competition in the finals.
Yeah.
But Peter, the perfect wonder child, he made Cranachan custard slices, which apparently is a Scottish thing. It's got cream, raspberries, oats, and whiskey. And it looked and tasted beautiful, of course.
Yeah, it was great.
So then the technical, we had walnut whirls,
Whirls.
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 which was a Prue recipe. I thought this was actually a decent technical. Like, I thought it seemed like a good technical to do, and especially at the final. And I thought it was interesting that they had not made anything with marshmallow up to this point.
Yeah, it was a good technical. It was tricky, but not just tricky for trickiness sake. Like, this is something that I would actually eat. I always appreciate a technical when it's something that actually sounds good to me, not just some weird fiddly thing from the 1700s century.
I've seen a bunch
or
of
whatever.
people making this on Instagram.
So, like you said, it's got marshmallow, it's got chocolate coffee ganache, tempered chocolate on the outside, and a walnut on top. What's not to like?
This is one that I thought, oh, okay, I could maybe make this if I had lots of time and could figure out how to temper chocolate, or pull a Claire and just go, it doesn't need to be tempered.
It's in Fahrenheit, it's 93 to 95 degrees in that tent.
Yeah, this was another hot day, which was bad for chocolate and for marshmallow, but they seemed to pull it off well overall. Oh, and Peter also said, toasty walnuts smell toasty and walnutty. And that made me feel a little bit better about the time I said on the pod that sour cream was sour and creamy.
Oh my God, have you just been living that in your head all this time?
Well, Mrs. Casper noticed, and I was like, I was really hoping no one would notice, and then she called me out. And I was like, I know, it was stupid. I'm sorry. Oh, the joys of podcasting.
With this, Peter was in the middle because he didn't have the whirls as much. Laura was at the bottom, even though hers looked nice. It was not
They
set.
did.
And then Dave won this technical, which he seemed really excited about. And honestly, I thought he did the best at having the actual whirl
He did.
of the walnut whirls going on.
Yeah, but his ganache was only all right, and Peter's ganache was perfect. It is coming down to these little details.
I guess this is yet another instance of taste winning out over looks because, like you said, Peter's did not look as good as Laura's. Laura's definitely looked better. Even though the chocolate on hers wasn't set, they said that it would have set given more time. So, yeah, Peter's must have tasted better, and that's why he got second instead of last.
And then on to the showstopper, which we've discussed a little bit already, the dessert towers. Like, I had some notes on this. I mean, first it was like Peter and Christmas again.
Yeah.
That child loves him some Christmas.
Yeah.
That Christmas elf.
I do feel like Dave's was risky with his redemption cake or redemption tower, but I liked that idea that at least he was pushing himself and saying, here's something I messed up on and I want to try to fix it. I mean, that is definitely a risk that you've already messed up on television on these things and then you're trying again. But at least he made a brownie that was an actual brownie this time and not a tray bake. Yeah. But I just felt like the whole time it seemed really clear to me throughout this challenge that Peter was kind of in the lead, even though I found a lot of it underwhelming. As I said before, nothing seemed to actually be a showstopper.
I guess I just didn't really like the ultimate look of the Rice Krispie cone on top of Peter's. I thought that the shoe cream puffs, I think they were, those looked really nice on Peter's. I think that was the strongest element of his. The cone with the cookies kind of glued to it, it was a little haphazard. He said it was more slapdash than he wanted it to be. So I think if he had executed it exactly how he had envisioned it, it would have been better.
Yeah. Peter, his head wasn't working for a minute in this challenge.
That one close-up of his extremely stressed out face, I've never seen that child look so stressed out.
Speaking of Peter being a child, these are 3 things he said within a 2-minute period. Silly Billy, Okey Cokey, and Jeepers Creepers.
I love him. I love all the things he says.
I was like, oh my god, he's a teetotaler and he has grandma sayings and it's kind of adorable.
Adorable. I don't want like his 20s to ruin him.
Oh, when Noel was it Noel? Or no, it was Matt who was telling him like, oh, so what are you going to do when people are just holding up a phone to you and filming you just because you're there? And he's like, that doesn't seem pleasant. And I was like, oh, buddy, you have no idea what you're about to enter into.
Speaking of Noel making everyone uncomfortable, we get the return of Mr. Spoon in this episode, and he makes everyone kiss Mr. Spoon. And I know that they are all living in a quarantine bubble together, but everyone kissing the same spoon in the times of COVID made me very nervous. And Laura made a rainbow dessert tower, and she said, there's always the rainbow after the rain. So she was playing into her narrative as well, kind of how Dave was most improved, and he was tackling the bakes he did badly at. She was like, well, I've messed up in the past, but I can still make something beautiful out of it.
I did like her attitude of like, oh, I get to make things that I actually want to make now. Great. I love it.
And also, I think that she knew she wasn't really in the running to win the challenge, which I think might have been to her advantage. I think she was calmer. I think she maybe even just enjoyed making the showstopper and not stressing over it.
Totally. Yeah. At this point, like before the showstopper, it's like we knew it was down to Peter and Dave.
For sure. For sure.
Oh, yeah. I think it gave her a chance to just enjoy the whole process more. I mean, yeah, she was still, kind of rushing at different times and stuff, but it seemed like beyond the, oh, here's things I like to make, it was just the pressure was completely off because there was no way she was going to win at that point. And they all knew that.
Yeah.
So yeah, going into judging, they don't really talk about Laura's chances at all because we know that she's not really in the running. They say that Peter and Dave were neck and neck, and they say that it was the closest competition they've ever had, which, I don't know. Are they just playing this up for the cameras like they were with, these are 4 of the best bakers we've ever had in the semifinals?
This stresses me out.
Yeah. So I'll fully admit the internet had spoiled for me that Peter won.
Peter wins. Yay.
Peter wins. I mean, I think it was really obvious throughout the entire episode. And honestly, the previous episode too. I feel like once week 9 hit, it was like, oh, okay, so this is Peter now. Like,
Yeah.
It was essentially Peter's to lose. I'm really glad that he won. He just seems like a nice person, which is a bonus for sure. And throughout the whole show, he just seemed to have the most creativity, the most talent, the best flavors. I was really glad he won. And just really happy that he literally realized his childhood dream.
Yeah.
I mean, arguably he's still a child, but
I mean, it was sweet to see how excited he was. And I will say, like, I thought the way that Dave and Laura took it, like, neither one of them were, like, upset. They were like, yeah, of course he should have won. Like, this makes sense.
they were very gracious losers, for sure.
Yeah, very gracious. And also the fact that final was, like, they gave the presentation and it was to all of the people in their bubble. Like, it was all of the people who'd worked on the production and the people who worked at the hotel, and that they got to share in this. Like, for a minute, I'd kind of forgotten, oh yeah, this is still in the pandemic, and all of these people had to leave their families for 6 weeks to do this. And just seeing all of the quote unquote bubblers together, I got really emotional, just like I did like at the start of the season. I even made a note that I was like, yeah, the pandemic is still here. Like it's still here. And, you know, I think there's bits of hope and with the vaccine and different things, but it's still a thing that we're dealing with every single day. And to see that these people were able to have like a little, you know, it was still hard work, but they got to have this little bubble respite where they got to celebrate something. It was really sweet.
It was very nice that they got recognition. And also, like you said, it's just a very interesting reminder that 2020 was a singular year for everyone for personal reasons too. You know, obviously we're all affected by everything that's going on. But then it's interesting to think, oh yeah, there's going to be this group of about 100 people who went into a baking bubble and had a baking competition for 6 weeks in the pandemic. And it's just like really interesting to think about, oh, what must that experience have been like for them? So it was nice to bring everyone to the celebration at the finale. Although it was very bittersweet because one of my favorite things about the Bake Off is having all the family and friends there to celebrate and just seeing everyone's family ready to cheer them on when they win. And it was a little sad that we didn't get to have that element of the finale this time.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help but laugh at all the pre-recorded video segments from family where it was really obvious that they were all reading prepared statements.
Yeah.
And that every time it was over their shoulder and someone was holding a thing, they had just filmed like 30 seconds of somebody holding an iPad and then put the thing in there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like pretend like you're watching this video right now. Yeah.
Well, and then I always like at the end of, you know, a Great British Bake Off season is when they show how people have kept in touch and everything. And I liked that they even showed, while they were all still in the bubble, Ermine's son and Mark's kids, and how they were all like their own little family within the bubble. And I thought that was very sweet. And then I'm going to get emotional, seeing that Lottie is the one who has like visited the most people and tried to like keep in touch with everyone, I just started crying. I was just like, God, Lottie, you're my favorite and I love you and I want to be your best friend.
I said it before, but I'll say it again. I really want some extra content that's life in the bubble that shows what everyone got up to behind the scenes during filming this season.
I think LJ said it at the beginning of this season for us, is like they totally like missed out on a whole nother television series they could have had.
Yeah.
For sure.
Big Brother meets Bake Off.
Big Brother Bake Off.
BBBO.
BBBO.
Bo. Well, I guess I'll say one final, yay, Peter. I'm glad he won.
Yay.
We'll have more to talk about next time with Bake Off, but let's move on to our back burner. So, as many of our listeners know, we started out as a Bon Appetit fan cast. So we're going back a little bit, but I think it matches the tone of why we stopped doing that and moved on into our Gourmet Takes era. Varmints podcast, our friend Paul over there sent a tweet asking if we'd listen to the Reply All podcast. So the three of us checked it out. Right now they're doing The Test Kitchen, Chapter 1. So in the summer of 2020, Bon Appetit faced an online reckoning. It imploded seemingly overnight, former employees calling it a racist and toxic workplace. But the story of what actually happened there started 10 years earlier. And we listened to Chapter 1, Original Sin. Damn, it really did start 10 years before any of this happened over the last summer.
Yeah, so this is going to be a 4-part series. This was the first part. They're releasing it weekly. And Reply All is typically a podcast about the internet and how people interact with the internet and how the internet shapes people and vice versa. So this first episode was interesting because, as Amanda said, it's kind of the precursor to Bon Appetit's YouTube era. So we get the background of essentially how Bon Appetit changed with the arrival of Adam Rappaport and how he was brought on as sort of like to shake up what Bon Appetit was. So this episode in particular explores kind of the groundwork that was laid for what we and probably a lot of you listeners are familiar with, the Bon Appetit YouTube channel, and what happened with that.
Yeah, I really enjoyed hearing the stories of people who I only learned about from the reckoning from like Twitter, like people we had been retweeting, people who had given quotes in several of the articles that we tweeted. And it was very interesting learning about their backstories and how the magazine used to operate.
Yeah, I thought one of the interesting things, with Reply All being about, internet and with all of this blowing up on the internet in 2020, so much of this, like with Rick talking about how he was being able to get content on because he was putting stuff online instead of in the magazine. And basically Adam Rappaport and the other editors weren't paying attention to the website, which is just like so the opposite of where they are now, where so much of it revolves around the website over there and YouTube and all of that. And to see that basically it was employees of color who were starting to innovate there. And then clearly, I mean, I'm sure we'll find out more as the series goes on, that was taken away from them.
Yeah, Reply All is making a very deliberate choice here. They interviewed over 40 people, I believe they said, but they are only sharing the audio recordings, the voices of the people of color whom they interviewed. So even though they interviewed a lot of people, it's very clear whose story this is telling, and they're really centering it around the experience of people of color who worked at Bon Appetit. So this should be a pretty unique journalistic piece. I think it'll definitely be different than, say, the Sporkfuls coverage of what happened. And also, since this has been in the making for about, I guess, going on about 10 months now, I'm interested to see what the rest of this series will cover.
I find it interesting that we had known and Carla had mentioned and apologized for things that she was complicit in, and we're kind of learning again about these things. And it does kind of make you think of like, oh, I'm her patron now on Patreon sort of thing. And it's just like, I know, like, it's the whole thing of like, yes, that's what Carla did in the past sort of thing. And she's acknowledged it and she's moved on to rectify this. And they are hinting at other people who have been complicit and not acknowledging it, It
was interesting to just hear, like you were saying, Justine, that Carla has talked about she was complicit in some of this, and then for there to just kind of be hints and non-identified people in other sections of the piece, but then also a big discussion about the position and complicity or not of Allison Roman, which I know we've mentioned before on the podcast. So and then I forget the man's name, but who was quote unquote like the right hand man of
Andrew Knowlton.
Rappaport's right hand. I was listening to that section where they were discussing how he would pick the top 10 like hot restaurants, and that he had put a Chinese restaurant at number 3 and then commented about how hot the wife was, and the Chinese American chef had done really well for himself for getting a white lady. Like, just, it was so gross. And having a mother who is white, who is married to a Chinese American man, like, if somebody said that about them, I would be so mad. And saying that to a coworker as though it wasn't an issue is just despicable.
Well, that's an interesting thing about this first part, is that it does focus more on the magazine culture before the YouTube channel was established. I think it's interesting that Reply All is trying to take a bigger picture look to be like, this is a systemic thing. It wasn't just the YouTube team. It wasn't just Bon Appetit. It's not even just Condé Nast. It's this huge systemic thing in food culture and in America in general.
Well, even I extend that to media culture. This podcast link went around in my work Slack. Well, specifically in like our inclusion Slack channel for our sort of what we share for the diversity and inclusion committee, and encouraging people to listen and discuss it and how it could possibly, you know, relate to us at work, as I work for a media company.
And we thought it would be worth mentioning to you, our listeners, because a lot of you probably followed us from our Bon Appetit coverage, and we thought this would be something that you all would be interested in listening to.
Yeah, and I feel like some people will be like, this happened a long time ago. Why do we keep bringing this up? And I'm like, well, it's still happening in several places, and it's kind of
like the pandemic. It's just always.
It's just always. But also, it is something to think about when we think about like picking like our next shows that we want to watch. You know, who do you want to support?
Who do we want to give our kind of not so little platform to? Like, who do we want to talk about? Who do we want to put front and center?
Yeah.
And who do we want to put hours of our time into supporting, both by watching and then talking about, and then hours of people listening as well. We all need to keep learning and getting better, learn from our own mistakes and mistakes of others, and not just go like push it to the side. Like, it needs to be known and processed and continue to grow and learn, I guess.
Totally.
And on that note,
hey! As we'd mentioned at the beginning of the episode, just a reminder, we are going to be doing a mini March Madness. So with all of that in mind, send us what shows you'd like us to cover in our upcoming season. And now it is time for some shout-outs. We want to thank everyone on Instagram who weighed in on what they'd make with a bunch of mushrooms or a huge avocado. Jen, Mary, Cat Lily Cooks, Cookbook Merit Badge, Whip Whisk Repeat, and labpartnerspod. Thank you, Mrs. Casper, for cheering on my efforts in our Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat potluck episode. It was very sweet to see you mention that on Twitter. Thank you to Cameron Flynn, who shared what they think when they hear 80s food. Jell-O molds with fruit and cream cheese, sloppy joes, and pudding pops.
Very 80s.
Absolutely. Very 80s. And then thank you to everyone on Twitter: Margaret, Elle, Nessie, Doug, Courtney, Gemma, Lieutenant Sandwich, Boobies and Noobies podcast, True Crime and Cocktails podcast, and Varmints podcast. You're all wonderful. Thanks for hanging out with us online and listening. So remember, you can rate and review us on iTunes or your podcatcher of choice. And if you do, we'll read it right here in this spot on the podcast. Thank you for joining us this week. Next time on the podcast, we have Digest, a retrospective of Series 11 of GBBO, and we're going to talk through our thoughts on the season as a whole. See you then.
thanks for listening to Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes.
We'd love to hear from you, so find us on Twitter and Instagram at pod_appétit.
And on Facebook at Pod Appétit Podcast.
You can also email us at podappetitpodcast@gmail.com and find all of our episodes on our website, podappetitpodcast.com.
Hey, Upper East Siders. Welcome to Three Gossip Girls, a Gossip Girl podcast. I'm Liz, an OG fan of the teen series who watched it live back when it aired in 2008.
And I'm Michelle, a newbie to the show, so I have no idea what's to come, including who Gossip Girl is.
What a gem. What a gem. We also had our good friend Ingrid join us for the first season of the podcast as well.
So, if you like ridiculous ship names,
A special drink paired with the episode,
or maybe just hearing old friends dissect this teen drama in all of its glory, this may be the pod for you.
you can join us 30-something-year-olds every Thursday as we unnecessarily dive deep into an episode of Gossip Girl.
We are currently starting season 4 of the show, and we cannot wait for you to hear some fun changes.
More guests, more predictions, and more drama. I mean, this is Gossip Girl after all.
You can find us on all social media platforms at 3 Gossip Girls Pod and listen on whichever podcast platform you enjoy. XOXO!